What is up, everybody, and welcome back to episode 6 of the Courtside podcast here on the Basketball Network. As always, I'm your host, Caleb, and joined by my good friend and co-host, Connor. Connor, another week, another podcast. How we doing?
Doing amazing, dude. Phenomenal weekend. Oklahoma State won. Pretty much every team I was going for won this weekend. Got the Texans for Sunday night football. Go Texans. So yeah, man. But you know what? I'm pumped for some basketball though.
Hey, so am I. How's that fantasy team looking, though?
I'm not gonna lie, I'm in a tight battle right now. Um, yeah, I was up, and then the Cardinals happened.
Yep, that'll tend to happen. So hopefully we can hold off there. Mine's looking a little dicey as well, but we'll see at the end of the week. But hey, that's not why we're here. We're here to talk some hoops. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So to start off today's episode, as always, let's jump into the transition three. So the three biggest stories in the world of basketball. And first off, we had some big news that's not necessarily specific to basketball, but has some implications for the world of basketball and specifically college basketball. So the Pac-12 announced that they're adding 4 new teams. So the Pac-2, as we know it right now, is now becoming the Pac-6, and they're going to be joined with Boise State, San Diego State, Colorado State, and Fresno State to go along with Oregon State and Washington State. Connor, initial thoughts on this one?
I mean, I think this was really big for the Pac-12. If they wanted to stay a conference, just stay in existence, it was kind of needed. I feel like we were kind of all expecting them to probably bring in some Group of Five schools, um, but yeah, and then I'm assuming they're probably not done. I'm assuming the next, because I know they have till like 2026 to get was it 4 more schools or 2 more schools
Mm-hmm.
to actually stay a conference. So I feel like probably in the next few months we'll probably get 1 or 2 more of these announcements.
Yeah, I agree. And, Pac-12 was ultimately at a place where it was, do we disband and those 2 schools look to join another conference or start poaching some other schools? And it looks like they went at the Mountain West because all 4 of these schools are actually going to be leaving the Mountain West and joining the Pac-12. And there's going to be a lot of buyout implications and a lot of money that's going to have to go around. But we know that Oregon State and Washington State were left with a decent bit of money after that whole Pac-12 explosion when all the other teams left, so they'll be able to help out there. But just thinking more on a basketball lines of things, I mean, the Pac-12 and the history of Pac-12 basketball is just huge, especially from the likes of UCLA and all the championships that came along when they were with the conference. We know the Mountain West was one of the better basketball conferences in that Group of Five realm. So getting a lot of those teams, specifically Boise State, San Diego State, that went to a national championship game a couple of years ago, Colorado State, that was in the tournament the past couple of seasons, they're actually getting some decent schools in the basketball side of things. But we'll just see how that matches up with all the other conferences because, in college basketball right now, it just seems like the rich are getting richer. And so I'm not sure what this move looks like for Pac-12 and continuing that elite status in basketball.
Yeah, definitely, doesn't move them into elite status. I think just the most important, it just keeps the Pac-12 alive.
Agree. And we'll continue to update everyone on this one because we know there's going to be a lot more movement. May look to get more schools in the Mountain West or may look to go out and try and get a Gonzaga just because the area might make sense. But jumping on to that next topic, we're going to talk about Asia Wilson. And she actually broke the WNBA single season scoring record this past week, scoring 971 points so far. She actually passed Jewel Lloyd, who was the previous record holder, who was at 939 points, and she's only 29 points away from being the first WNBA player to break 1,000 points in a season, and she still has a couple of games left.
Yeah, dude, pretty exciting, man. I'm expecting her to hit that. What is that, like 14 and a half points a game? I think, she's more than capable of doing that. Honestly, maybe she could get it in one game. But just huge congratulations to her. Phenomenal player, having a phenomenal season. Looking forward to watching them in the playoffs.
Yeah, what a season this has been for the WNBA and all of their records. I feel like every single record, specifically single season ones, are getting shattered left and right with Asia Wilson, Caitlin Clark, and Angel Reese, it seems like. But she will definitely get this, and she's almost guaranteed to get the 1,000 points this season. Just an absolute dominant player in the WNBA and probably on to another MVP type of season. But these WNBA playoffs are gonna be really fun to watch. A lot of exciting teams. I feel like previously the Aces, have been just kind of running it, but this season I think they're the 4 seed right now, maybe the 3 seed. So it's kind of tight up there at the top, and you don't want to play some of these lower seeded teams either. So really fun things to see out of the WNBA and continue to grow their product. But the last one we want to mention and touch on is actually a new rule change in the NBA. So the NBA is expanding the replay review. And so now they're actually able to look at fouls on out of bounds rules, which they previously weren't able to. And so the NBA Board of Governors actually approved this earlier this week, which was able to be expanding the use of the coach challenge, and this is actually going to start in this upcoming NBA season that we got. And I can see a lot of scenarios where this is actually super helpful for those coaches.
Yeah, I would say I'm not like the biggest fan of it. I think the NBA already takes way too long on their replay reviews as it is, you know. I mean, if you even just look like for one out of bounds calls, they'll spend close to 5 minutes reviewing it, and it draws these games out so long. I think obviously we want them to make the correct call. I do just feel like at a certain extent though, you have to be like, when is enough enough? You know? I feel like kind of at this point, is there not technology that we can just replace the refs with? You know? So but I mean, I think I'm sure the players are like, oh, they want the correct call made, but from my point of view, and I think from the fan enjoyment perspective, I kind of see this as an unnecessary thing.
No, I agree. I think we do see a lot of stoppage in play in the NBA nowadays, especially with all the fouls that are occurring, but also these coaches' challenges or any other reviews that they're going to. The one thing I will mention is that this is going to be triggered from coaches' challenges. So keep in mind that, if they don't get it right, they're going to lose that challenge. So it might not make as big of an impact in that sense. But I do think it's going to help with getting the right calls. But I agree. I just hope this doesn't, drag out these games any longer than they already are, just with all the different commercials and different things that are going on. But from a perspective of getting the calls right, I think this is really going to help.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, the NBA is probably one of the leagues whose biggest emphasis is on making the correct calls. So I mean, it was kind of a natural progression, just going from what they've done in the past. But once again, I just think personally, I'm probably not going to enjoy this as much.
The one thing I will say is I'm actually excited for this in the sense of the playoffs because that's when, these calls, I mean, they always matter, but in the playoffs, they truly do matter. So a coach being able to challenge that call could be super beneficial, especially whenever, it can turn the tide of the game or if it's a one possession game. So that's where I'm really looking forward to seeing it. But throughout the season, just in regular NBA games, some of these that might be more throwaway than others, I don't know necessarily how much that's going to impact. All right, well, that's our transition 3 for today. We're going to go ahead and jump into the rest of the episode. So, if you listened to our last podcast episode, you know that we're actually going division by division, going through our expectations and predictions for the upcoming season for each of these teams. So, today we got the Central Division in the Eastern Conference. So, this consists of the Bulls, the Cavs, the Pacers, the Pistons, and the Bucks. And as we did last time, we're going to be putting each team in one of the 4 categories. So the categories are contenders for an NBA championship, playoff locks, a play-in/bubble team, or they're going to be in kind of rebuild mode. So they're going to be tanking for flag, as we call it. So we'll go ahead and jump into the first team. And so we got the Chicago Bulls. Last season, they finished as a 9 seed and ended up losing in the play-in game. Return a lot of their core, but do have some key additions and some major losses. So, Connor, I'll let you go into those.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think obviously Kobe White's back, Zach Levine's back, Patrick Williams, Nikola Vucevic, Ayo Dosunmu, and also I think a name that we need to mention, Lonzo Ball has been cleared for 5-on-5. Um, which is huge. Has not played in a couple seasons. Has had that knee injury that doctors just were not able to explain. So they'll be getting him back. Whether the level that he'll be at, is a little unclear. Um, but I think some of their additions are really interesting, right? You got Josh Giddey, Talon Horton Tucker. You got Bazell from the draft and Chris Duarte from a trade. Um, I'm kind of just interested to see where these players fit in. Just because Giddy and Horton Tucker really don't stretch the floor all too well.
Yeah, I'm interested specifically for Josh Giddey. I don't know if he's necessarily like where he's gonna play. He's not gonna start, I wouldn't assume. Maybe he will, and they move Zach Levine up to a small forward. But you already got Kobe White and Zach Levine in the backcourt right now, so Josh Giddey might slide in there, and one of them is going to be playing the shooting guard, small forward. But I agree. I'm very interested with some of these moves as to where these pieces are going to fit. And then we got to mention some of the losses. DeMar DeRozan, losing
Mm.
him, and he's going over to the Sacramento Kings. Alex Caruso being the one that they traded away to get Josh Giddey from the Oklahoma City Thunder. And then they lost their backup big and Andre Drummond to free agency as well, as he's now with the 76ers. Not 100% sure where this team is going. I feel like we're kind of in the limbo period between a rebuild, but also trying to get to the play-in now. So that's really interesting to see. But I agree on the Lonzo Ball piece. Hopefully getting to see him back and playing this season, as you mentioned, getting cleared for 5-on-5. So expecting to see him in the upcoming season. Not sure if we'll see him full blown at the beginning of it, but throughout it, maybe more in the middle, getting to see him back in play. But that's another guy that you bring in that's at the guard position. I feel like they're really heavy from the guard spot, but when it comes to that front court, they're a little thin now, losing Andre Drummond and DeMar DeRozan.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Patrick Williams, you got him at the 4. Then you got Vucevic at the 5. Um, and just kind of like, who are you going to bring in, to relieve one of them? Um, just not really a whole lot of names on this roster that I would probably feel comfortable taking on that role. Um, yeah, and then I think, like you said, kind of, you know, what is the GM's goal here? Like, are they wanting to rebuild? Are they wanting to compete? It's definitely this weird limbo, like you said. Um, yeah, I think for me, off season was probably not the best for the Bulls at all, especially losing Caruso. Um, Obviously, I think Giddy could be a good player in the right situation, but in terms of fit, I think Caruso just fit with the Bulls better, and so then just trading him away was just kind of a puzzling move.
Yeah, I think the Bulls are in the situation where they're going to see what they get with Josh Giddey this upcoming season. In terms of his contract, he's a restricted free agent after this year, so it could be one of those things where he ends up sliding in nicely and they love the way he's playing, so they, make the offer and continue on with him after this season. But if it isn't something that looks promising going forward, they could let him walk in free agency after the year, and that might be kind of their move in thinking of whether or not they're going to be rebuilding. But I agree. From the front court specifically, as you mentioned, we got Vucevic, we got Patrick Williams, Jalen Smith, who was previously on the Pacers,
Mm.
looks to be listed as either the backup power forward or center, and they actually recently signed Kenny Lofton Jr. to a contract. He's been a fun one to watch in the G League, but not sure how many minutes he's going to play in the NBA type level of play. So I agree. I'm just not 100% sure where the Chicago Bulls GM is going with this one. For me personally, if I had to put him in one of those tiers, I think I would put them in the play-in bubble team because I don't think they're 100% tanking with this group. They do have some bright spots and do have some places where they can, make a run as I mentioned, finish as a 9 seed last season. So that's where I'm expecting them to finish this upcoming season. But I don't know if that's necessarily the right move. I feel like we might need to be doing a full rebuild in Chicago.
Yeah, so as the team stands right now, I'm expecting them 9 or a 10 seed. Um, Not expecting them any higher than that. I will say I can definitely see, depending how the first quarter of the season goes, you know, you kind of got some interesting trade pieces with Vucevic. Ayo Dosunmu, a guard who can play defense, distribute a little bit, and he can shoot, at times. Um, so I think, do you think maybe like they start off slow? Do you think they kind of start to deconstruct their roster with Vucevic? Obviously, Zach Levine, is a name they'll probably throw out there too. I definitely think there might be some players on this team that could help a potential contender.
Yeah, 100%. That's where I was going with it. If they do start really slow and it's not looking promising, Zach Levine has been mentioned in trade rumors the past couple of seasons. So I could see them moving off of him before the trade deadline, as well as Nikola Vucevic, bringing in some young guys and then going full rebuild and tank mode. But I feel like we've thought this last year and even the year before last with the Bulls, and it just never seems to happen. And so that's why I'm still leaning the play-in bubble side of things, but I could for sure see them going to tank mode if the beginning of the season doesn't get off to that great of a start.
Yeah, so kind of like going off of that, do you see any player on this roster as untouchable for trade teams, or do you think they make everyone, or do you think they could make everyone available?
I think the one player that is untouchable is Kobe White. He has shown a lot of growth and a lot of flashes of stardom in Chicago. I believe that Chicago is gonna want to continue to build around him. Even last season, just putting up some pretty good numbers. I think that's the one guy that they're not going to be willing to move off of. Looking at everyone else on the team, maybe not Buzelis, just, obviously just
Just
drafting
drafted
him.
him. Yeah.
So wanting to see that one through, but those would be the two that I would think are untouchable. Everyone else I think is going to be free game. What about you?
So I'm kind of inclined to agree. I will say though, I feel like if the right trade for the right price comes about, I could see them potentially moving on from Kobe White. But like I said, I think it has to be the right trade. Um, Obviously, we have seen his flashes of potential. Dude is a heck of a player at times. Um, and it's not even just like he's a solid role player at times. Like he's really good at times. Um, so yeah, I can definitely see a team wanting him, but I think they're probably gonna potentially have to give up a first round or two for him. Um, so yeah, but I think just at a baseline level, I think Kobe White's probably off the table. I think Bazelis is probably for sure off the table. I mean, just drafted him. I think you got to give him a chance.
I agree. And Kobe White come off of a career season. I mean, started 78 of the 82 games last year, averaged around 19 points and then about 5 assists, 5 rebounds. And that jump from the year prior, he was actually only averaging roughly 10 points, so almost doubled his scoring there. I think that they really like Kobe White, but I agree. I mean, if some crazy trade offer comes in, I don't think they're going to turn it down. But I do think he's pretty much untouchable for anyone that's thinking through what everyone else would offer for Kobe White. I don't think Chicago would accept.
Sure.
All right. Well, I think we both
Yeah.
agree play in bubble is the expectation, but could see them moving to tanking for flag and going into a full rebuild if the beginning of the season doesn't start off right. But we'll go ahead and jump into the next team. So, next up, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. Last season, finishing fourth in the East and just narrowly got by the Magic in a 7-game series. Initially in the first round of the playoffs, but then had a quick second round exit to the eventual NBA champions Boston Celtics. Return their main core of Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Karis LeVert, Max Strus, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, and then even some guys that played some key minutes later on in Dean Wade. Um, but the key addition really didn't make too much noise. They brought back Tristan Thompson to firm up their bench from a front court perspective. But then really the only loss that they had was their coach, JB Bickerstaff, who was fired. So we're pretty much bringing back the same exact team from last year and trying to run it back. Connor, what's your initial thoughts? Where do you think we're going to see the Cleveland Cavaliers this season?
So I will say I think they did lose Isaac Okoro, which obviously not one of their star players, but I think he was a solid role player. Um, but I feel like we'll probably see a little bit of the same from this team. Um, Definitely a playoff lock for me. I'm not going to consider them contenders right now, just because it pretty much is that same team that they're bringing back. Um, not really any big additions. They really didn't lose anyone that big for them. They're running back the Garland, Donovan Mitchell, and Evan Mobley trio. Which obviously Donovan Mitchell was on trade block. Just surrounding trade rumors. Just kind of, I feel like was over them the whole season and the whole off season. Um, but yeah, I'm kind of expecting the same. Probably fourth or fifth in the East. Um, I think their key is going to be Evan Mobley, though. I feel like their team kind of goes how he goes. I think if he plays well, they win. If he doesn't play well, they tend to lose.
Yeah, one thing I will mention on Isaac Okoro, he actually just agreed with an extension with the
Oh,
Cleveland Cavaliers that literally just happened
look at that.
yesterday. So he's going to stay with the team, but as you mentioned, not a huge part of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, does play some key minutes at the small forward position and more of a defender for the team. But I agree, playoff lock for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Can see them finishing around the 4 or 5 seed again. But the one thing that's going to take them over the hump, in my opinion, is injuries. Darius Garland last season only playing 57 games really hurt the Cavaliers, not only from just wins and losses, but just chemistry. I think that they continue to need Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell to be out there together. That's when we see them at their best, and that's when we see them play their best. And then the same thing with Donovan Mitchell. He only played roughly like mid 50s in games as well. So they have caught the injury bug, it seems, recently, the past couple of seasons. And so the one thing that's going to get them over the hump and allow them to become that contender, one, I think they might need to add one more key piece, but two is just the injuries. It seems like time and time again that's what's hurting the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it. Even into the playoffs, they were struggling keeping their guards healthy. Um, but yeah, I feel like though, like their bench kind of hurt them. Like they have some players who can contribute, like Dean Wade, Ty Jerome, Sam Merrill. Um, they definitely contributed at times, even through the playoffs. But it, I don't think any of them are someone that you look at your bench and you're like, we can rely on them when we need to. Like that's our sixth man. Um, and I feel like they really didn't address that this offseason, which you could argue might be one of their biggest ones. I know they do have Karis LeVert, which obviously we know he can score, but I don't think he's the same player he was when he was on the Nets.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, specifically from a backcourt perspective, besides Karis LeVert, they don't really have anyone else that's coming in and, playing big minutes or, doing a lot for them. I know Sam Merrill had some nice games last year, averaged 8 points per game for the Cleveland Cavaliers, but it's a big drop off from Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. I would have liked to have seen them firm up their backcourt, or at least the bench part of their backcourt a little more this offseason. And so that's why I'm predicting and expecting it to be pretty much the same as last year. 4 or 5 seed, make it through the first round maybe, and then a second round exit to one of these upper teams in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I'm still just kind of interested if they're gonna solve their issues with Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. Um, to me, I feel like realistically, Evan Mobley could probably be a five. He doesn't have the best shooting stroke. He can shoot it at times, um, but he's not the most consistent. And if you kind of watch their games, when he is attacking, when he's hitting his shots, they win. Um, but when he's kind of being reserved and stuff and, not getting his shots, they kind of like don't play well. Um, but yeah, and so I'm just kind of wondering if they'll kind of choose like, oh, do we want Allen or do we want Mobley? Because I was kind of expecting that this off season, but they ended up keeping him. They're gonna try to keep that experiment going. So kind of like, what are your thoughts on those two?
I think Evan Mobley is continuing to work on his jumper. Jarrett Allen is going to stay who Jarrett Allen is. Absolute beast on the defensive end, pick and roll threat from a lob perspective. But Evan Mobley actually had a bright spot in terms of shooting percentage from three last year. Jumped up to 37% from 21% the year prior. But he doesn't take that many attempts. Last year only shot 59 times, so less than one or around one per game with the amount of games that he'd played. But shooting 37% is not horrible. Again, as I mentioned, the year prior was 21% on over 100 attempts. But I think if he continues to develop his jumper, he can play that four spot alongside Jarrett Allen, especially if he can knock down the corner three. I think that's the biggest thing for Evan Mobley. If he can knock down that corner three, that team is going to be deadly because they can space him out. And then you also basically have 2 7-footers playing in your lineup because we know Evan Mobley is super athletic and can guard the four. But I agree, he can also play the five. So I'm glad they didn't move off of this experiment just yet, playing Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley beside each other. Because I do believe in Evan Mobley and his capability from a jumper perspective. But we'll have to see if that continual improvement plays on into this season.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the big thing for me though is obviously only shooting a little over 1 3 a game, especially when you have a center like Jarrett Allen. That just like you need to up those numbers. Um, I know he shot 37%. I think if he has the confidence to shoot more, he needs to shoot more. Because obviously, if you're only shooting 1 3 a game, teams aren't going to be the most worried from you out there. And can cause lane problems, especially when you have two guards like Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. If he's taking at least 3 per game, staying at this same 37%, I think the Cavs will be scary. But I think if he's going to hover at this 1 3 per game, I think that might be an issue once again for the Cavs.
Yep, and last thing I'll mention on this one, Evan Mobley had injury problems as well. He only played roughly 50 games, so when the majority of your starting five is only playing 50 of the 82 games that there is, I think there's just going to be a lot of, chemistry issues along with the team just not being 100%, fully prepared and okay with each other on the court. So I do expect that number to go up. Obviously, the season prior shot over 100. So hoping to see him in more on those numbers and continuing to see the same percentage there. But ultimately, my expectation, 4 or 5 seed and a second round exit in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I have them in as the playoff lock, but definitely do not have them as a contender in the East.
Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and jump on to the next team. So next up, we got one of the teams that I'm sure we're both excited to talk about for one specific player in particular. But we got the Detroit Pistons. Last year, unfortunately finished with the worst record in the league. They do return their core of players, but I don't know how much of a core it is outside of a few. But they do return Cade Cunningham, the former Oklahoma State Cowboy, Asur Thompson, Jaden Ivey, Isaiah Stewart, and Jalen Duran. And then they had a lot of moving pieces in terms of additions and losses. So, Connor, I'll let you go over some of those and who you're excited to see out of that group.
Yeah. Um, I would just like to say I'm excited for a lot more than Kate Thompson. I think they have one of the most exciting young backcourts in the country. Um, Obviously, you got Cade, Osser, and Jaden. Phenomenal. Like I don't know, like if I was his front office, I would be so excited to have these three guys. You know, any combination of these three, I think I would be happy with. Um, but yeah, I think obviously big one, Ron Holland from the draft. Even though they did not, or even though they did have the worst record, they did not get either of the top few picks in the draft. Unfortunate, but honestly, it's one of the fun things about the NBA draft that it's not record based. Having the bottom three record helps you get the first pick, but it's not a guarantee. So the lottery is just always a fun time just because of that. But I will say I think they picked up some two key players that I would like to highlight, and that's going to be Tobias Harris and Malik Beasley. Um, Obviously, Tobias Harris no longer with the 76ers. You got a stretch four. I know they've kind of been running, Isaiah Stewart, Jalen Duran as their two main bigs. But I think this is a good piece for them. Uh, Obviously, I don't think Stewart and Duran on the court together is probably the best idea. I kind of like them as kind of like how the Knicks used Robinson and Hartenstein last year. I think it would be great if they could just sub them in and out, playing equal minutes. I think they're both guys with tremendous rebounding, can have amazing motors. But I think if you put Tobias Harris at that stretch four, especially with Cade, Osser, and Jaden, dude, you got some crazy open looks. You got some slashing guards, you got some playmakers, and then you're adding the shooter in. That's huge. And then obviously Malik Beasley, we know he'll give you. He's a big 3-and-D guy. He can knock down shots when he needs to, and he can typically compete on defense. So I really like these pickups for them.
Yeah, I agree. And another pickup I'll mention is Tim Hardaway Jr. So getting him in free agency as he's no longer on the Mavs either. So they prioritize shooting this offseason, and I think that's going to pay dividends for this team. We know Cade Cunningham was like a low 30s 3-point percentage shooter. I think Jaden Ivey was like mid 30s, and then one place that we really need to see Asur Thompson develop is that 3-point shooting. He shot, I believe it was 19% from three last season. So although he brings all those intangibles and exciting, things to see in his development, that is one thing that I hope, has really stressed in practice this offseason, because if we see those numbers go up from him, I do see this team could, not necessarily make a run at anything crazy, but maybe make a run at the play-in, because I do tend to agree they have a very exciting young core. But then Tobias Harris, I think you hit it right on the head with, allowing him to play that power forward, and then Jalen Duran and Isaiah Stewart can kind of be 1A, 1B from the center perspective, going back and forth with each other. I like the pickups that the Pistons made this offseason, and agree that they have a very exciting young core. Also have Marcus Sasser and then Ron Holland, who they just drafted. So a lot of things looking up in Detroit. We're just going to have to see those moves translate into wins. And so hopefully we see that happen. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to come just yet. Just with the rest of the teams in the East, I do think that they're going to still miss out on the playoffs. So therefore, I'm going to have to put them in the rebuild or tanking for flag category. But all that being said, very high on the moves that Detroit made, and hoping that this is going to push them in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'll be key on their top three guards developing their outside shot. I think if one of them can develop an outside shot, they'll take a major leap. Um, teams obviously they're just not scared of those three guards from outside. I know, Cade was that mid 30s, which is obviously not like horrible, but definitely not what you want from your point guard. You kind of want him a little closer to 40%. Um, but I will say, I definitely think, especially in Ivy and Cade, because from their college days, they can shoot. I think it's just about developing that shot and getting them open looks as well. Um, Obviously, I think when Cade plays, I think there's a lot of attention on him for obvious reasons. He's the Pistons' centerpiece. Um, but one thing I did want to highlight that I kind of glanced over was Isaiah Stewart does shoot almost 39% from three. So he can stretch the floor when he needs to. Especially if you get him and Tobias Harris out there, that's a lot of space for those guards. Um, but I did want to notice one highlight was they did fire Monty Williams after signing him to that huge deal. Um, and then they fired him after one season. You know, a little puzzling move. It's like, why do you hire him and then only give him one season? Um, Especially with this young core, I think that they can develop together. Uh, but yeah, I'm still kind of expecting them to finish in the tanking for flag. I think if they play at the best of their ability the whole season, I'd put them in a bubble team, to potentially make the play in. Um, but yeah, I'm kind of expecting them to not intentionally tank for flag, but probably they're not going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, just comparing that roster to everyone else in the East, I just can't see a way for them to make it. But I do agree if they end up playing to their absolute best of their ability, a 10 seed's not necessarily off the table, but expecting more of maybe the 13 and 14 seed in the East and not necessarily the 15 that we saw this season.
Yeah. Past
All
few
right,
seasons.
yeah, for real. All right, moving on to our next and a very exciting up and coming team that we saw a lot of last year was the Indiana Pacers. So ended up being a 6 seed, but made it all the way to the conference finals where they ended up losing to the eventual world champions, the Boston Celtics. But they made a lot of moves at the end of last season, specifically around trade deadline, acquiring Pascal Siakam, so he's still with the team, but also returned a large part of their core with Tyrese Halliburton, TJ McConnell, Andrew Nembhard, Benedict Mathurin, Obi Toppin, Miles Turner, and Isaiah Jackson. From the free agency and draft perspective, made a little noise, but not much. They added Johnny Furphy from Kansas and also James Wiseman in free agency, and then they lost Jalen Smith, who we mentioned earlier, and then Doug McDermott as well. So running it back with a lot of the main guys, and don't see an issue with doing this on this team. They had a great season last year, and Tyrese Halliburton saw a lot of hype, and I think that they're going to continue it going this year, and I think this team is definitely a playoff lock.
Yeah. I have them as a playoff lock as well. Um, I will say though, I was a little disappointed with their offseason, you know, um, just because they really didn't do a whole lot. I mean, I think James Wiseman, obviously, he's had a disappointing career than what his expectations was. But I think if he can be like a reserve big for them, I think that's a really good pickup. If they're not relying on him, to score 15 points a game, just be like, hey, can you give us, like 10, 12 minutes a game, just play hard. I think that's a great role for him. I think losing Jalen Smith was a little difficult. I know they got some players that can maybe fill in that gap. But he was a good piece, when players were kind of getting hurt, and going down. He was someone that they knew was going to come in and he could compete, you know. So I do think that loss is a little hard, and they didn't really fill that role with anyone else. Um, but I think the Pacers were just kind of a good example last year of a team catching fire at the right time. They kind of got to the playoffs and It was just like no one could keep up with them. Um, and then, I mean, I'm not saying this would have changed the outcome, but obviously the Knicks ended up dealing with a lot of injuries down the stretch. Um, Definitely hampered, or it definitely helped out the Pacers a lot in that series that the Knicks weren't at full strength. But I'm kind of expecting the same season. Um, I can see them getting as high as a fourth seed, but I can honestly kind of see them going as low as an eight seed too.
Yeah, I'm in the same range as well. I think if I had to narrow down a little more, I do think they would be in that 4 or 5 range, similar to the Cleveland Cavaliers, maybe, making it 1 or 2 steps higher than they were last year in terms of seeding. But do want to touch on the, Jalen Smith that you mentioned earlier. I think for the Indiana Pacers, it was just the thought of we have Isaiah Jackson, we have Jarris Walker, Jarris Walker being their rookie last year. I think they're just expecting bigger steps from them this year and wanted to provide a way for them to get, an expanded role compared to what they had last year. And with Jalen Smith on the team, that just wasn't going to happen. But I do agree, maybe could have made 1 or 2 more moves to firm up this team, specifically maybe in the small forward position, because right now we got Aaron Nesmith, who actually played great last year, but could have seen a few moves there and maybe getting a better player in that one. But this is just a team, like you mentioned, caught fire at the right time, but they also gel and play so well together. Having a guy like Tyrese Maxey with the ball in his hand and pairing that off with a big like Pascal Siakam, and then you got a shooter in your center and Miles Turner, and then just a beast on the defensive and offensive end, and Benedict Mathurin, and another 3-point marksman, and Aaron Nesmith. They just kind of play so well together. Also have very, very good bench pieces with, especially in the backcourt with TJ McConnell and Andrew Nemhard, who made big moves last year. I like this team a lot, but do tend to agree if they wanted to move up into that, title contender category that we have, there needed to be 1 or 2 more moves that were made.
Yeah, and here's my thought. You know, I think as good as Tyrese Halliburton is, and then obviously I think Miles Turner is arguably their most important piece on this team. He sets the tone for their defense, and he stretches the floor phenomenally for them. Um, but if you're just looking at the rosters, compared to probably those, like top three teams, maybe top four teams, just from top down, their roster just isn't as good. You know, Obviously you got the Knicks and Celtics and the 76ers. I'll throw the 76ers in there as well. There's just, I think the talent level is just a little bit more than what the Pacers have. I think, like you said, I think they play super well together. I think Rick Carlisle is a good coach. He has a good system in place with them. Um, Obviously, like we've been saying, they rally around Tyrese Halliburton. Um, but yeah, to me, it's just the talent. This, gap in between them and the contenders just a little bit much.
Yep, I 100% agree. All right, well, I think we can move on to our last team that we have in this division. We have the Milwaukee Bucks. Last season finishing as a 3rd seed and ended up losing to the Pacers in the first round, but that might have been due to some injuries, so wouldn't take that without a grain of salt there. But returned a large core, and obviously Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard, Chris Middleton, and then Brooke Lopez, Bobby Portis, and Pat Connaughton. Did make a few key additions, specifically in Torian Prince, Gary Trent Jr., and DeLon Wright, but then had some key losses, and Malik Beasley, Pat Beverly, just on the defensive side of things, as well as Jay Crowder. But one thing I wanted to make sure and ask you, so I'll ask you this first, and then we can dive more into the Milwaukee Bucks. From a draft perspective, they drafted A.J. Johnson out of the NBL League in Australia. What was your initial thoughts on Milwaukee's Bucks draft and drafting A.J. Johnson?
Honestly, I think they kind of got a steal. I honestly kind of expected him to go a little bit higher than he did. I don't know. I like it. I think if he, has time to develop, I think he could be a really good player. Um, I think there's kind of a reason that so many teams passed up on him. But I did not mind the pick at all.
Okay, I think you said something very key there for me. So, in terms of a pick, it's not a bad pick, and I agree. If he has time to develop, he could actually develop into a great player and could be a big steal. But from the Milwaukee Bucks timetable of what they're trying to do right now, it didn't make 100% of sense to
Mm,
me because
yeah.
he's not going to be a guy that's going to come in and contribute now. And for me, if I was the GM of the Milwaukee Bucks, and obviously there's a reason I'm not, I would have went out and got a guy that was going to contribute now. Like someone like the Celtics did in Baylor Shireman, not saying they should have drafted him, but someone that could actually come in and is ready to play some NBA minutes. I would have liked to have seen the Milwaukee Bucks do that because I do think AJ Johnson's more of a project rather than a player for them to use right now. So I was kind of up in the air on the pick. I do see where you're coming from, but would have liked to see them go a little more in a sense of let's get someone that's going to help Giannis and Dame get back and win another championship. So
Yeah.
we'll see how that goes, but I was wondering your thoughts on it.
No, I mean, I honestly didn't even think about it from the perspective that you just said, because that draft pick kind of makes you think like, oh, are they planning a rebuild? Because that's typically is who is kind of draft players that have potential but are not quite there yet. You see teams that want to compete draft those more kind of older players, complete players who are just a little more skill ready. Um, so yeah, I think from that perspective, it's definitely interesting. Um, but maybe they kind of had their eye on some free agents. That they were like, hey, we're probably not going to. Even if we do draft a player like that, we might not even use him. So it was like, well, what if we draft this player who has potential? That could be the reasoning. Obviously, I'm not the Bucks GM, like you said, but yeah, I didn't even think that from that perspective. So
Yep. Well, jumping in, kind of thinking where we have them in terms of the categories. For me, I have them as a playoff lock, not necessarily a title contender. The reason being is I just don't know if they have what it takes to go up against the likes of the Boston Celtics and the Philadelphia 76ers. They're fringe title contenders for me. Um, I just don't know if they're there. I mean, you have Giannis Antetokounmpo, so that might make me swing the other way, and Damian Lillard, but I don't think they're that deep. They got their starting five, and then have a few pieces off the bench, specifically Bobby Portis, and Pat Connaughton. But everyone else, I'm like, I just feel like they don't have that much depth, and that's what you need in the playoffs, as well as not getting injured like they did last year. And I just don't know if that's gonna be the case.
yeah, I think if this was 2018, this would be the favorite in the league right now, based on the players they have. Uh, but I feel like you can never really count Giannis out. But I feel like we say with every team, he's had some health problems the past couple seasons. He can't seem to stay on the court. For more. Especially when it came to the playoffs. It just kind of seemed like just couldn't quite get him out there. Obviously, some of their other players had injuries as well. But I will say I don't want to pass over on the Gary Trent signing. Um,
Yes, I
I
was
mean,
gonna mention that too, so I'm glad you're talking about it.
he's a player who can drop 30 any given night. Um, you know, he's just one of those bench scorers who can come in, and just drop buckets. He'll either give you 30 points or he might give you 5 points. But when he gives you those 30 points, you're thankful, you have him. Um, but honestly, I kind of like the Taurean Prince signing. Gives them another guard, or if they want to, or not a guard, a wing player, 3 and D, or if they want to slide him down to the 4, which I know he plays a lot of minutes at. He can definitely do that as well. Um, but yeah, definitely have them as a playoff lock. Um, Honestly, I can see them falling to a 6 seed just based on the other teams in the East.
Yeah, and based on injuries, right? Like if we see Giannis or Dame go down a little early and have an extended period of time where they're out during the season, I could see them moving down to the six as well. But I want to go back real quick to the Gary Trent signing because I was gonna wanted to make sure we touched on that. So obviously losing Malik Beasley, so that other or the two guard, the starting two guard for the Bucks last year. So they lost Malik Beasley, so really needed to replace him with someone. And they went out and got Gary Trent Jr. Played last year at the Toronto Raptors. And I think this is the perfect signing for the Milwaukee Bucks. A guy that is just out there and ready to catch and shoot and fill it up. I saw a really cool stat on Twitter this past week specific to Gary Trent Jr., and he actually shot the highest percentage of anyone on wide open threes in the
Wow.
league. And so he shot on wide open threes, I think it was like 57%. So more than likely, if you pass it to him and he's wide open, that shot is going in. And playing alongside of Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and even Chris Middleton, if he can get back to a little bit what he was looking like pre-injury, he should get a lot of wide open threes. And then just in general, shot just below 40% last year beyond the arc. And as you mentioned, pretty streaky, so he could go out there and drop 30 or 40 on any given night. We've seen that happen before. I think this is a big signing and a big replacement piece. Might honestly be a little better of a piece than Malik Beasley for this team. So I really like that addition for them.
Yeah, no, I think they did a really good job of building the team that Giannis needs. You know, Giannis will just, I don't think he'll ever be a good outside shooter. I know he's tried to work on that part of his game. But, it's just not his strength. It's just not his go to. Um, but, I mean, you got Lillard, you got Pat Covington, you got Brooke Lopez, Bobby Portis can stretch at times. Tarian Prince and Gary Trent, like all those dudes can shoot. Um, you know, and if you got Giannis coming down the lane, and he can kick out to any of the other four guys, that's huge. Um, just because the way to stop Giannis is you clog the paint. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I will say one thing. I know we've talked about health. I think if they can keep Giannis healthy, even if Damian Lillard goes down, I think the Bucks will be fine. But I think when Giannis goes down, I think they'll struggle.
Does DeLon Wright then slide over as the starting point guard if Damian Lillard goes down? That's my only hesitancy with that one is, who's going to be the guy handling the ball? We know Giannis is going to get the ball a lot, but you still need a
Yeah.
little bit of a point guard to set up the offense. So I think I guess that's DeLon Wright who slides there. I'm the age and injuries and then the depth of this team is what scares me.
Yeah, I mean, the depth is a little scary. Um, but if he really needs to, Giannis can be your primary ball handler. He has pretty good vision. He can dish out some assists when he needs to. He can run your offense at times. Now, not sure how sustainable that is for extended periods of the season. But he can definitely do it. And then if I guess Delon Wright will have to step up a lot though if Damian Lillard goes down.
Yeah. So we'll have to, continue to monitor and look at what their health looks like and how that's going on. But I do think it's going to be another good season for the Milwaukee Bucks, but don't know if it's necessarily going to be a successful season in terms of their standards. Would love for it to be, would love for Giannis to get another championship and Dame to get his first, but we'll just have to wait and see on that one.
Yeah. I know we said we can see them going as low as a 6 seed, but I can see them high as the 2nd seed as well. I think if they can kind of just get back to, I think if the players can get back to their form, I think they'll be just fine.
Yep, I agree. All right, well, that is a wrap for our expectations and predictions for the NBA Central Division in the Eastern Conference. Went through the Bulls, the Cavs, the Pistons, the Pacers, and the Bucks. But before we go today, as always, I want to do a little fun section of the podcast. And like we did last time, we had a lot of fun with what college did he go to. So we're actually going to go ahead and do a second round of that. So Connor and I have both prepped 5 players for us to go back and forth, specifically players from this division, to see if we know what college they went to. So I'll go ahead and point it back over to you, Connor. Give me your first player, and let's see if I know what college he went to.
All right. I'm gonna go in reverse order of the way we went into the teams. So there's a good chance you know this, but honestly, I had no idea at all. But Brooke Lopez.
Okay, Brooke Lopez. I do know that him and his brother Robin played at the same school. Believe it used to be one of those Pac-12 schools, but is no longer. So give me Stanford for Brooke Lopez.
That's correct. Yep.
Let's go. Yeah, dude, can you imagine playing Brooke Lopez and Robin Lopez, just like the twin towers? I'm pretty sure they played center and power forward, like right next to each other. It
Yeah.
would have been just an absolute
Oh my gosh.
insane lineup.
It's like one that elbows you into the other one's elbow.
Exactly. I don't know much about how Stanford was back in the day when they were playing, but would like to look into that because I bet they were pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go the opposite way so we get some different teams in here. But I am going to go Chris Duarte. What college did he go to?
Chris Duarte. Let's see. Okay, I know he's. Let's see. He was definitely in the past 4 years.
Had some moments in March Madness.
Yes. I think. Okay, wait. He was also old Pac-12 team. I'm trying to think. I think I may be mistaken. Did he play with Bowl at Oregon?
He did play at Oregon. That is correct.
Yeah. Was Bowl there at the same time? I'm trying to remember.
Oh, Duarte was there for a while, so maybe, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. Yeah, there's a good chance that they played together. But yes, Duarte did play at Oregon, and he was amazing at Oregon. They made some runs in March Madness as well when he was there.
Dude, there's a few years, dude. Oregon was so exciting to watch.
Yeah, hey, even last year with Infali Dante, they always have like one or two guys that are really fun to see and end up going to the NBA.
Yeah. I think Peyton Pritchard was there too, right? Is that where he came from?
That is Yep, that's correct.
Always exciting guards there.
For sure. All right, hit me with another one.
All right. Okay. Sorry, I just lost my. All right. Coming from the Pacers. All right. Let's see. All right, man, dude. I really got the old guys here, man. But James Johnson.
Oh gosh, James Johnson. Indiana Pacers, James Johnson. That guy's been in the league and on so many teams.
15 years.
15 years, yeah. Okay, I am not going to know this one. But I'm going to give it a guess. I'm going to give it an educated guess. James Johnson. Okay, I'm going to ask one question. Was this an old Pac-12 team as well?
It was not.
Oh gosh, okay, yeah. I have no idea.
You need to go to the opposite coast.
Opposite coast. Florida State.
Honestly, a little. It's kind of close. James Johnson went to Wake Forest.
Oh, Wake Forest. Okay. That does not add up to me, but okay. That makes sense.
I know. I know. I was also surprised.
All right, yeah. Nope, had no idea on that one. Okay, here we go. Cleveland Cavaliers, Max Strus. What college did he go to?
Strus. Oh my gosh. Max Strus. Let's see. I think he was drafted, I know, like 5 or so years ago. Man, dude, I have no idea.
I'll give you a hint. This is a hard one. I don't even know if this is gonna help you at all, but it's in the city of Chicago.
Oh wait. No, I was thinking of Loyola Chicago, but I don't think it's that one.
No.
I don't know. Who is it?
He went to DePaul.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea DePaul was in Chicago.
Yeah, I didn't know that for the longest time. I just realized it actually.
Wow.
All right, so we're both one of two so far. All right, give me another one. Here we go.
All right. It's gonna be really funny if you get this, but Paul Reed.
Paul Reed.
We're also on the Pistons right now.
Okay, Paul Reed. Okay, the only reason I'm going off of this is because you said this is gonna be funny. I'm gonna guess it's DePaul.
It is indeed DePaul.
Oh, that's too good. That is too good.
Yep.
I was completely blank on that one. That was my only hint, so I just went with it. Hey, here we go. All right, I'm coming back at you with another Pistons player. Let's go, Jaden Ivey.
Oh my gosh. Come on, dude. Give me a hard one. Purdue.
Okay, a little Boilermaker. You know,
Sir.
Zach Edey's not the only one from there. I'll give you another one. This one might be easy too, but I just want to know if you know Tobias Harris.
Bias. Oh. He's a Tennessee, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Yep.
Look at you.
There we go.
Got him on lock on
Sir.
the Detroit Pistons.
All right, heading back to the Cavs. All right. Georges Niang.
Oh, come on. Iowa State Cyclone.
Yep.
Who did he play with?
Iowa State.
That he had some fun teams at Iowa State too. I know there's a couple of guys that he played with.
I can't remember who was on his team exactly, but he was one of the players who was on the team that broke Kansas's Big 12 tournament record or streak of wins. They're the ones who like took down Kansas in the tournament for the first time in like years.
Gotcha. I want to say there's like some other guys that Monte Morris. That's who it is. He was on there with Gorgeous Niang. I knew there was another NBA player.
Iowa State's has some good teams in the past, or I guess over the past like
15
Big 12 years or so.
Big 12.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Indiana Pacers. Andrew Nembhard. There's two. He went to one and he transferred to one. So I'll take either.
Gonzaga?
That is correct. Now, I'll give you additional points if you know where he transferred from.
Okay, so Gonzaga was the okay, let's see.
Yeah, Gonzaga's the right answer. That's where he ended and got drafted from. But where did he transfer?
Because I believe, didn't he make his name at Gonzaga?
Yes, I would say some people knew him if you were really into really into college basketball, but
yeah.
He was most notably known.
I'm not gonna lie, I have no idea.
He came from the Florida Gators.
Really?
I believe played 2 seasons there, actually. Yep.
I did not hear about him until he was at Gonzaga.
Yeah. And then he was amazing there. So, all right. I think you got one more for me.
Yes, sir. All right. Interested to see if you even know what the school is. All right. We're gonna go Torrey Craig.
Oh gosh. Torrey Craig. And you don't think I'm gonna know this school?
I don't think so.
Can I have a hint then?
Let's see. Dude, I don't even know what conference they're in.
Oh gosh. All right, I'll just throw a guess out there.
All right.
Torrey Craig.
So it's the 3 letters involved in the name are the same exact 3 letters as a school in California.
So either like Cal or USC. Cal Fullerton.
No, it is USC Upstate.
USC
They are
Upstate.
it's yep, University of South Carolina Upstate. They are a Division 1 in college
Oh, it's
athletics.
South Carolina. It's not even California.
No.
Wow. Okay, then.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Last one, Milwaukee Bucks. I'll give you Pat Connaughton.
Oh, Notre Dame.
There we go. Fighting Irish to end the show. Nicely done. Nicely done. I think you definitely had me on that one.
Dude, I'm not gonna lie. The first one you asked me, I was like, oh my gosh, reach back in there somewhere.
Hey, nicely done. Nicely done. Well, I think that is all we have for the episode. Connor, anything else you want to say before we jump off of here?
No, man, I enjoyed it. Definitely excited to see some of these teams play in this upcoming season. Obviously, I think this definitely excited to see a couple of the young cores, but also some veteran cores as well. Definitely a lot to look forward to this season.
For sure. Well, before we jump off, as always, want to mention thank you so much for watching and listening. Do what the bottom of the screen says if you're watching on YouTube. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. If you're listening on any podcast platform, please make sure to give us a 5-star rating. And on anywhere that you're listening or watching, please leave us a comment. Love to see it. Also, make sure to follow at the Basketball Network on Instagram and TikTok. But as always, we'll see you courtside. Peace.
Peace.